Hello everyone. Sorry about my voice. I am not feeling very well today, and honestly, this is a horrible tragedy. I feel like talking about, because the hate against Christians are real, and even though people try to hide it. I literally just learned all about this on Tuesday. I take breaks from the news and politics when it's the weekends. Normally when it's the weekend, sometimes when it's a slow weekend, I look at it, and on holidays, unless something big and important is supposed to be published, or well, I just kind of ignore it. A lot of it's because this isn't my job. There's too much for me to go over myself, and I'm doing this all on my own. I don't have any help. I barely have any equipment. I won't be doing too much on TYT, except for the next video, because they're despicable and I just can't ignore it. But this is a horrible tragedy, and it should be talked about. We need to be seen. The hate against Christians is very, very real.
We are learning from authorities that at least 207 people were killed in these bombings in Sri Lanka and hundreds injured. The death toll is expected to rise. The first round of bombings this morning targeted 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels across the island, according to police. Another 2
churches and hotels. Christian churches. Clearly they were targeting Christians, and in the hotels they were targeting any civilians. These were clearly terrorists. They don't care who gets hurt as long as they're not Muslims. I know Christians were the primary target, but yeah, they weren't the only target. They just don't care who gets killed. Who gets hurt. These terrorists, these radical Islamists, they target men, women, children, anyone who doesn't bow by their faith. These radical Islamists, and yeah, they target Christians. Christians get a lot of hate. They're persecuted around the world. We have it nice here in America, even though we kind of deal with a lot of hate here in America. It's still not the same as how we are treated in the rest of the world. It's not at all.
bombings occurred later in the day. Authorities say the majority of the 8 bombings.
This was posted 2 days. This was posted the day of the killing. So later in the day, this is on Easter Sunday.
Happened in the capital city of Colombo, and reports do indicate that 35 foreign nationals were killed, including American citizens. Police have arrested 7 people believed to be connected to the attacks. Footage.
I saw reports saying 2 Americans were killed, and I saw some saying 4. I don't know the exact number, but whatever the number, any death by terror is too much. Whether it be right wing, left wing, this is just a horrible tragedy.
Shows one suspect being loaded into a police car as an angry crowd throws punches at him. The 3 hotels that were hit are all popular for tourists visiting the island, and many likely came to celebrate the Easter holiday with friends and family. Video footage.
So even in the hotels, they were still targeted because they were looking for Christians. They expected Christians to be in those hotels. Yeah, but they didn't care who got in their way. They didn't care any other people they hurt. They really don't care about anyone. But they were clearly targeting Christians. They targeted 3 churches and 3 separate hotels famous for tourist attractions on Easter Sunday, where they were clearly most likely filled with people celebrating Easter, which would be Christians.
From the site of one church shows blood strewn across the pews and bodies covered with sheets. Many churches in Sri Lanka have now canceled their Easter services out of fear that another bombing could occur. Following the tragedy, President Trump tweeted his condolences, saying the United States stands ready to help. Although just over 7% of Sri Lanka's population is Christian, the history of Christianity in Sri Lanka dates back to the 1st century. The leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, weighed in on this Easter Sunday attack, saying this.
I wish to express my affectionate closeness to the Christian community, hit while it was gathered in prayer, and to all of the victims of such cruel violence.
Just 10 days ago, Sri Lanka's police chief warned that suicide bombers wanted to hit churches across the country. His statement was reportedly based on intelligence provided by another country, saying that NTJ, a group described by the Economic Times as a radical Muslim group, was planning the attacks. So far today, no group has taken responsibility. Now, Pete Jedediah Ed, reports do indicate in Sri Lanka that a curfew has been imposed and social media has been banned in an effort for authorities there to avoid further casualties. The death toll is
Alright, so yeah, the government knew, or at least they were warned. There were multiple warnings. They didn't do any precautions on it though. They were even given suspects, and they were even given a group that they thought were going to attack. They were even given possible targets, yet no extra security. The incompetence of the government fails sometimes.
expected to rise in this bombing in Sri Lanka. Authorities do say that at least 190 people have been killed and hundreds more injured. The first round of attacks did target 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels across the island, according to police. Another 2 bombings occurred later in the day. Authorities say the majority of the 8 bombings happened in the capital city of Colombo and that at least 35 foreign nationals were killed. Police have arrested 7 people believed to be connected to the attacks. Footage shows one suspect being loaded into a police car as an angry crowd throws punches at him. The 3 hotels hit are all popular for tourists visiting the island, and many likely came to celebrate the Easter holiday with friends and family. Images from the site of one church show blood strewn across the pews and bodies covered with sheets. Many churches in Sri Lanka have now canceled their Easter services out of fear that another bombing could occur. Although just over 7% of Sri Lanka's population is Christian, the history of Christianity in Sri Lanka dates back to the 1st century. The leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, weighed in on the Easter Sunday attack, offering his condolences. Just 10 days ago, Sri Lanka's police chief warned that suicide bombers wanted to hit churches across the country. His statement was reportedly based on intelligence provided by another country, saying that NTJ, a group described by the Economic Times as a radical Muslim group, was planning the attacks. So far, no group today has taken responsibility. Now, Pete, Jedediah, Ed, right now we are learning that in Sri Lanka, a curfew has been imposed and social media has been banned in an effort for authorities there to avoid more casualties in the country.
Islamic terrorists.
Yeah, that was a bit of a repeat, but there's like a little bit more information on it. And this is the last video I want to show on it. This really is a horrible, horrible tragedy.
Killed hundreds in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. But what's key beyond the horror was that the targeted country was aware of the threat. And this nugget from USA Today, quote, the country's prime minister and his cabinet were unaware of the intelligence until after the attacks due to political dysfunction. Political dysfunction, which is really code for deadly incompetence.
Yeah, the government was incompetent. They were warned as early as April 4th. They were warned in early April. There were multiple warnings over and over and over again. Like, this isn't just it was incompetence. The government's job is to protect the people, and it clearly failed.
And taking your eye off the ball. It's something to remember as our media invites us to chase phantoms of their own making, lost in fever dreams over collusion, obstruction, impeachment, hate hoaxes, Stormy and Avenatti, is that real evil still stalks this planet. And terror is liquid, always seeking the path of least resistance. And that path is often carved by our own distractions, sparked by those who see politics as far more important than our safety. Which is why terror couldn't compete with the Mueller report even on Easter. Nothing matters except winning that news cycle. But hey, it happened far away. And in America, it's a peaceful time. But only because there are people you don't know making sure it's still peaceful. Until one day when terror strikes us at home as it has before. We can't forget that America is terror target number 1. And that our number 1 priority isn't impeachment, but security. Our borders, grid, landmarks, water, food supply, everything's up for grabs in a time where terror has smartphones too. And when something big finally strikes, winning a news cycle looks more than petty. It's downright dangerous. Emily, we've talked about this before. Al-Qaeda can come and go. ISIS can be disappeared, but there will always...
I don't really see many news organizations talking about this. Like, even if they did, it was talked about much less. They barely talked about it. They didn't go into detail like the New Zealand shooting. Okay, there's some sort of clear bias, and it's just wrong. It's horrible, and it's
be an ideology, and an ideology will always give birth to something new, I think.
It's true. There'll always be hate against Christians, and there'll always be hate within this Muslim community. That's just how it will be. This is this is horrible, horrible tragedy. Horrible tragedy.
I agree, and we've also talked about it in the context of that there needs to be some type of detailed and plan leveled so that the global messaging that's happening with Islamic terrorism and those kind of fundamentalists, we need to address that. And I agree with you that when you hoard information and when you have political infighting that prevents you from sharing that information, that costs lives. And we are on a dangerous trajectory as well, not to be a fearmonger, but we are as well. If this is the ball that some people are focused on, it should be security. It should be security first, 100%. But I think, yes, that the messaging is important because that's traveling around the world.
Dana, they had I guess they had 2 weeks advance warning. Did they not take it seriously, or was it just something that just got lost?
They'll have to find out. I mean, but what a way to figure it out afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, Secretary Pompeo was quite gracious today, actually, to the Sri Lankans, saying that we will help, we will provide all this. But we have been helping, and we help all of these countries. And maybe they don't get enough foreign aid as they would like, but they have to do something for us, too. They have to be willing to share the information with each other, or at least with us.
Right.
Because I got this statistic today from the Brain Room. Since 2012, 23,177 Christians have been killed for faith-related reasons. 23.
Hate against Christians, like I said, it's very real, and it just gets hidden. This needs to be talked about. They hide. They don't want to admit it, okay? Because Christians aren't part of the victim group. Muslims are. Gay people are. Black people are. Women are. If you're a Christian, you're not part of their protected group. So no matter what happens, they won't really talk about it.
That is abhorrent. It is unacceptable. And if we are going to provide aid, and we're going to provide intelligence services, we're going to provide sharing, maybe military gear, whatever it is that they need, the least they could do is pass it up the chain that there was going to be an attack. It could have been prevented.
Juan, there were 8 coordinated detonations. This is a group that we've never heard of, but it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, it just mutates, changes, evolves, gets better.
Right, so this is the argument that we have, you know. Before I start that, let me just say, the kids that died, there's a kid, there's a 5th grader from Sidwell Friends in D.C., there were 3 of the 4 children of a Danish billionaire,
right,
who's the biggest landowner in Britain. And I just can't imagine the depths of his sadness. Japanese people were killed. So this was a worldwide event in that sense. It touched us all. And I think it's important to also keep in mind, and we see it here in the U.S., more security on our churches in the aftermath of this, and there were some suspicions going back to Notre Dame in Paris. Luckily, apparently, that was an accident. But I would say this: when you hear people say, "Oh, ISIS is defeated," I worry about it. Why do I worry? Because people might think, "Well, then we don't have a threat." But we do have a threat. We have a threat, as you described it. I think you said, water goes wherever there's an opening.
Right.
So what we see is that this ideology now shifts. And we never heard of this group. All of a sudden, here they pop up, and they're bombing a church in Sri Lanka, and they're going after Christians. So to me, this is a generational fight. The ideology, unfortunately, is not defeated, and we as Americans cannot lose sight of the fact that we're in an ongoing fight. And when the president votes for whatever reason that ISIS is defeated, don't be fooled. We've got to keep up not only the attention, but the fight. And with regard to the intelligence, we know there are all sorts of arguments about, did we know what was coming on 9/11? And you know what? You can blame them. You can say they're incompetent. They're not the U.S. government, not U.S. intelligence, not Israeli intelligence. They're not British. But the fact is, the people responsible are the terrorists.
Well, right.
Holy cow. I was not expecting this from him. I'm frankly impressed by this man. This was wonderful. He did a great job on this. Okay, I'll give him props. I wasn't expecting this from him, but what he said was 100% accurate. Now, I do think that the government was just incompetent, though, because it wasn't just one warning. It was warning well in advance. It was multiple warnings, and there were just more and more warnings. They were given a list of suspects. They were given the possible targets, and they were given the name of the group. Yet, their excuse was the Prime Minister wasn't in on any security briefings. So, this was something important that they should have talked about. They should have, Easter, the attack on Christians on Easter, pretty obvious. They should have done something.
Clarify that, though? I mean, because after 9/11 is when we took down the wall between intelligence and law enforcement. Yeah. That made a big difference. Then we stepped up efforts all around the world to make sure that those governments where you knew there were hotspots would have what they needed in order to share, to have the information, to have the equipment that they needed. We learned a lesson. Correct. From 9/11, and if we're going to help these countries, the least they can do is they had the information. They just didn't pass it on.
Correct. I think that we have made changes and we have adapted post 9/11, but I just don't like the idea that we would say, well, it's their failure, their fingerprint. People did that to us. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was fair to us, to our government. I think the terrorists are the ones who should be held responsible.
So, Jesse, we've seen different responses to this.
It's like a slight disagreement, but there's nothing wrong with what he's saying here. I can understand his viewpoint. It's 100% true that the real fault are the terrorists, these horrible extremists, these people that will do whatever they can to instill fear and to kill as many people as they can. This kind of mentality will never go away. It will manifest itself in something else. It always will.
Some are pretty odd.
Yeah.
Would you care to pick the ones that disgust you most? Or
well, I have the Washington Post right here.
Yeah. You see, it's people are trying to talk about how we should get out, and this war on terror it's stupid. Well, I mean, it's obviously not over. This is a horrible tragedy.
And it's just kind of disgusting. Christianity under attack. Sri Lanka church bombings stoke far-right anger in the West. And it's a whole article not about editorializing about radical Islam, murdering people. It's editorializing and saying, oh, Christians are upset that churches are being bombed. And they're making Christians and conservatives out to be the villains for reacting to terrorist attacks. Look at some of the leading Democrats, how they characterized it. They didn't use Christians. They didn't say a lot of churches. They actually said Easter worshipers were under attack. Now, you don't call Muslims Ramadan worshipers. You don't call Jews Passover worshipers. It's a made-up phrase. And I think, why do they make up phrases like this? And this is one of the reasons why people don't trust liberals, because they're not in touch with reality. They do this because they're pandering to Muslims. Because a lot of liberals feel that they are so obsessed with how other people think about them. And if they're thought of to be insensitive, that drives them crazy. And second of all, they think their own rhetoric causes Islamic extremism. Remember, blame America first. They think Islamophobia causes radical Islam, so they do whatever they can to sanitize it. Now, BuzzFeed actually came out, one of their editors, and said, wow, President Trump, imagine how outraged he'd be if whites
were the victims of the Sri Lanka attack. And I just found that completely despicable to play the race card after a terrorist attack. It's what they did in Katrina. Remember Bush? Oh, he would have acted faster if there were white victims in Louisiana. And when I step back and think about, conservatives are pretty colorblind when it comes to life. They don't talk about the different races of babies in the wombs. They want to protect all life. And it's a lot of conservatives in the media who talk about stopping the carnage in the south side of Chicago. So I think it's really unfair when the media always, no matter who does it, if it's a white person.
We will talk about this more in my other video, but yeah, this whole thing that the media, the left is doing after this attack is despicable. Because it's just horrible what they're doing. It's horrible. And in my next video, I will take on specifically TYT on it, because they're big idiots. They're horrible people. First they defend Ilhan Omar for minimizing 9/11, and then they go blame the victims, victim blaming. But this is a horrible tragedy. It's one that make this video talking about how horrendous it is. It's what they did was completely and utterly wrong.